Welcome again to the CFO Strategy Briefing Series. My name is Paul Hunter. In the previous podcast, we looked at how CFOs can think across past, present and future using systemic cognitive strategy practice principles and, of course, supported by generative AI. That gave us a way to organise complexity and improve judgment. In this briefing, we turn to a related challenge. That's the quality of the decisions themselves. Even with good information and a solid framework, judgments can be distorted by bias, noise, and by weaknesses in the way decisions are made and governed. Our focus is practical. In the podcast, we'll look at three key topics. First is the main cognitive biases and noise patterns that affect CFO decisions. Second is how a few simple decision hygiene practices can materially reduce errors. And third, how the viable system model helps CFOs think about the organisational side of decision quality. The aim is to strengthen your role as the CFO and board's most trusted advisor by making the decision processes you oversee more reliable and transparent. So let's kick off with bias and noise. Most senior finance leaders are familiar with cognitive bias. That's systematic tendencies that pull judgments in particular directions. In the CFO context, common examples include 1. Confirmation bias. That's when disproportionate weight is given to information that supports the preferred outcome, such as a proposed acquisition, and downplaying contrary evidence. Second is overconfidence, underestimating the range of possible outcomes in forecasts or valuations, leading to narrow ranges and insufficient contingency. Third is anchoring, that's being unduly influenced by an initial reference point, such as last year's budget, a first offer in negotiations, or an early valuation. Finally, we've all been here, groupthink, executive teams or boards converging on a view too quickly, with limited challenge or exploration of alternatives. These are directional errors. They push decisions consistently in one direction. Alongside bias is something less visible but equally important, and that's noise. Daniel Kahneman, winner of a Nobel Prize, along with his colleagues, for work in this area especially, defines noise as unwanted variability in judgments that should, in principle, be consistent. Studies in a range of professional settings have shown that when different experts assess the same case independently, their answers often vary far more than they or their organisations realise. In finance, for example, noise might appear as large differences between individual valuation estimates for the same project. Second, inconsistent risk ratings for similar exposures. And third, different approval standards being applied to comparable business cases. Noise does not have a direction, it is scatter, but it undermines fairness, predictability and confidence in the system. Two similar proposals may receive very different treatment simply because they were evaluated on different days or by different people. For a CFO, both bias and noise matter. Bias can lead to systematic over or underinvestment, while noise creates inconsistency and erodes trust. The good news is that both can be reduced by improving the design of the decision process. The second point or second area for conversation is decision hygiene. That's practical tools for CFOs. What is decision hygiene? Well, it shifts attention from trying to correct people in the moment to improving the method by which decisions are formed. Several discipline practices are particularly suited to the CFO role. Let's have a look at them. First, independent judgments before discussion. For major investments or strategic options, ask each participant to form and record their view independently before the group discussion. Topics, valuation ranges, risk ratings, or a go, no-go recommendation with reasoning. Independent first views reduce anchoring on the first speaker and make differences visible rather than buried. Second is structured decomposition. Here, it's recommended CFOs break complex judgments into components. For an investment case, that might mean estimating separately market size and growth, margin trajectory, capital intensity, and key risks. For each component, ask for a range and rationale. Only then combine them. This reduces the influence of overall impressions and makes assumptions explicit and testable. Third is a concept called premortems, quite naturally the opposite of postmortems. So we're getting that difficult bit over and done with before the decision is made. To run a brief premortem, imagine that it is 18 to 24 months later and the decision has worked out poorly. Ask what happened. Capture likely causes, integration difficulties, customer response, regulatory change, and consider whether they are being adequately mitigated. Premortems routinely surface risks that standard risk registers miss. Next is to appoint named challenger roles. Here I'm talking about assigning explicit roles to individuals in important meetings, such as you are now an evidence challenger, or someone else is going to take alternative scenario advocation. Their task is to look for overlooked data or different interpretations. This legitimizes constructive dissent and reduces groupthink without creating confrontation. 5. Simple noise audits. Periodically conduct a small internal study. Present the same case to several people independently and compare their judgments. If the spread is large, treat it as the characteristics of the system rather than an individual failing, and adjust the process. For example, by sharpening criteria, using reference cases, or standardizing certain steps. These practices do not have to slow decisions dramatically, nor are they going to be undertaken for trivial decisions. They are also straightforward for a CFO to sponsor, particularly when linked to the fiduciary responsibility to steward capital and risk on behalf of the board. Now, a quick look at the organisational side, and here I have named the viable system model as a useful guide. It's not in avid use, but it is certainly very effective. It's something that is re-emerging as a viable application to today's business. It works along the lines where decision hygiene is required that operates at the level of individual decisions and meetings. It's an environment where there is a lack of organisational dimension. That's the way information flows, a lack of understanding of who is involved, and how feedback is handled. The VSM, developed by Stafford Beer, provides a useful lens. It distinguishes 5 core functions that any organisation needs to remain viable. Turn that around. If you can understand these 5 core functions, you'll have a much better understanding of how an organisation operates. Function 1 is operations, the business units and functions that create value today on a day-to-day basis. Quite obvious in some degree, but becomes useful when you separate it then from the next 4. And the next one is coordination. So that's the mechanisms that keep operations aligned and avoid conflict or duplication. From coordination, we need control and optimization. That's the oversight of performance, resources, and compliance. And you're starting to get warm now because the next one is intelligence, which is what we're all about with strategy and CFO's control of strategic intelligence in particular. And that is the scanning of the external environment and developing responses to emerging opportunities and threats. Well, then that's influenced and guided by the higher level. Board, CEO, CFO, level 5 policy and identity. That's setting direction and resolving tensions between short-term performance and long-term positioning. I think that's the difference between long and short-term strategy as well. From a CFO perspective, VSM prompts questions such as, are our finance, strategy and risk functions truly playing an intelligence role, or are they mainly focused on short-term control? Do our management and board cycles provide effective feedback from operations and the external environment into strategic decisions, or are important signals slow to reach the people who can act? Where might there be bottlenecks or gaps? Is there a strategic alignment? For example, strong operational reporting, but limited forward-looking analysis. By asking these questions, CFOs can identify where the decision infrastructure itself may be contributing to bias, noise, or delay. Adjusting reporting lines, meeting rhythms, or the scope of particular committees can improve decision quality just as much as refining the content of individual business cases. What do we do with all that knowledge we've just discussed then? It's useful information. What do we do with it? So we integrate it into systemic cognitive practice through hygiene and organisational design. If we look now across both 9A and 9B podcasts, an integrated picture emerges. So systemic cognitive strategy practice, or SCSP, provides the cognitive structure that's retrospection, inspection, and prospection across multiple time horizons. Generative and agentic AI support these loops through data handling and pattern recognition. Decision hygiene comes in when you need to improve how individual judgments are formed and how groups deliberate. Finally, the VSM encourages CFOs to examine whether the organisation's structure and feedback loops support good decisions. For CFOs, bringing these elements together strengthens your position in your role as the board's trusted advisor in 3 ways. First, you can explain not only what course of action you recommend, but how the organisation is making that decision and why the process can be relied upon. Second, you can identify where bias, noise, or structural gaps may be affecting outcomes and propose concrete remedies, and they will be grounded in recognised practice. Third, you can demonstrate how financial stewardship and governance contribute directly to organisational adaptability, resilience, and efforts to engage in deliberate disruption, not just cost control. Time to wrap up. And in this briefing, topic being how CFOs keep strategic decisions clean, we have examined bias, noise, and decision hygiene and the organisational side of decision quality and how they combine to improve the reliability of strategic decisions. In our next podcast, CFO Strategy Brief 9C, we will turn to uncertainty and communication. In it, we will discuss how to use scenarios and ranges to navigate deep uncertainty and how to discuss those uncertainties with the board in a way that supports confidence rather than anxiety. Thank you for listening. Further resources are available at our csosandbox.buzzsprout.com podcast channel and, of course, our website phsnl.com.